Hi, and welcome to A Class of Their Own podcast, revealing the human stories behind their name. We will hear honest and intimate reflections from our guests who, despite their circumstances, shape a world that reflects their unique visions of success. Join me, Mira Magecha, to learn from these inspirational people and take the first step to make your own change. On today's episode, we're joined by Sasha Watson. Hi, Sasha.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm super.
How's your day been so far?
It's been really good, actually. A mixture. Bit of mumming in the morning, bit of bossing in the afternoon.
Love it, bossing in the afternoon. And we are in the afternoon, so...
Yay.
What kind of mood are you in today?
My usual. Playful.
Oh, love that.
Curious.
Where's this conversation going to take
Where
us?
is it? I don't know.
So I've known you for about a year and a half. We met at a networking event, and you're one of the very few people, in fact, the second person I've ever met at a networking event who I've stayed in touch with. And I'm really excited to see where this conversation goes, because I'm not entirely sure I'm allowed to be proud of you, but I am, because of the journey you've been on, and you've done things by not taking the easy route. So I'm really curious as to where this conversation goes. You're not allowed to make me cry.
Noted. I'll try.
And let's get started
Let's do it.
Who is Sasha?
My gosh, what a big first question. Okay, so the easy answer is I am a mum of two amazing daughters, but also a sister, aunt, et cetera, et cetera. I guess in the professional sense, I am a chief people officer. So my life and who Sasha is really all about people and other mostly great humans.
Some great humans, let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, some really aren't, but that's another podcast probably.
And so let's talk about where Sasha comes from and your childhood. What are some of the stories that you can share with us about who is Sasha as a child?
Oh, where do I go? Well, childhood was a long time ago. So I...
You're only like 10.
Yeah, that's true. 25.
Yeah, 25. Okay.
Yeah,
We'll stick to 25.
Maybe 45. Maybe that's kinder. No, so I grew up in the Oval, which, of course, those areas are all now so gentrified. But, Oval, Brixton, Peckham will always be dodgy to me, in a good way. I say that affectionately before people get offended about my remarks. But I grew up in the Oval. There's actually a big block of council estate behind the cricket ground. And that really is my childhood. Even though I moved different places, when I think about being a kid, I think about that estate in the Oval. And my mum raised us on our own, and she had me, my two brothers, and then a break, and then three more boys. So there are me and 5 brothers.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a whole other story, which I'm sure we'll come to. And we struggled. She was on her own, and we were raised on benefits. And we didn't have much, but she worked really, really hard, that it never felt that way. Like, I always had great clothes, great trainers. I was never hungry. All of the things that you would probably associate with, a single mum in the world of benefits, I just didn't experience. And, it was mostly happy childhood, but I saw stuff that if my daughter saw experience, I'd be mortified. There's things that happened that I didn't know were illegal until I was a lot older. But I am who I am because of that. And I say to my eldest, she's almost 13, that everyone needs their grit. And certainly growing up on that estate gave me so much of my grit. And it just means there's so much I don't take for granted, but also so much that really doesn't bother me because, been there, done that, seen it.
Yeah. And when you say there's so much you didn't know that was illegal growing up,
Yeah.
give us some examples.
Oh, without implicating myself.
Of course.
I mean, small things like smoking weed, I just thought that's what people did. It was just very open and accessible.
Yeah.
But I guess, there are rules around benefits, there are rules around all sorts, and I guess sometimes we were quite liberal with some of the rules.
When you say you grew up on benefits and your mum still tried to make sure you had everything you possibly could, it was you and 2 siblings at that
mostly,
time.
Yeah.
How was that possible?
She's a total boss. She just, and I still do it to this day, she just had an incredible way of adding one T-shirt into my wardrobe and transforming it. Or she was a big maker. So she would make and amend and adapt clothes or accessorize or just small things like that. And she taught us, and certainly I still do this, open the fridge door and someone says we've got nothing in, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can generally create 2 meals out of very random products. And stuff, I think, that's actually quite nice. And she just did things like that, and she was just really creative, and she didn't waste, and she was quite disciplined like that, I think. And those skills are extremely helpful, especially for, my children will have no idea about that life. I say this to them all the time, of course. I'm that boring parent that says, in my day, I never did this, which is terrible. And I hear myself, I'm like, I can't believe you're that person, Sasha. But she was just extremely resourceful.
And growing up with 2 brothers.
Yeah.
And you're the eldest, is that right?
I'm second.
You're second.
And then there were 4 now younger than me.
Okay, so growing up in a household full of boys,
yes.
What was that like?
Bloody tough. So when I was in it, I absolutely hated it. And I have a sister on my dad's side, but growing up in the house every day with boys was so tough because some of the things were ridiculous. Like I just wanted someone to dress up with and play girly games. So I had to try and force my brother, who's 2 years younger, to do that. And he said to me the other day, you really tried.
And failed?
Failed miserably. But just to be like understood as a child when nobody else understands you is really hard. And plus they were really tough with me. Like kick a ball, that really hurts. Like, don't cry, Sasha. It was really tough. But now, my goodness, as an adult, as a female in work, it means that I am often a minority, but I still don't care. Like, been there, done that. Yeah. And growing up with brothers, I think, prepares you for the world so very well. My resilience is incredibly high. And like I said, it takes a lot to faze me. But they just taught me a lot about, falling over, scraping my knee. Don't sit there and cry, like, get up. And although at the time I was like, nobody cares, poor me. I'm now, like, just really tough. And I love that.
And what's that taught you about the next phase of life in terms of being tough and where that journey has taken you?
I think that it's a balance. I think there have probably been times that I've been too tough, and that means that people think you don't need them. So I don't have great help-seeking habits. I find it really hard to ask for help. I find it really hard to be vulnerable. Although I'm very open, I'm not often very vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And, people can generally see that, but most people think you're open, you're being vulnerable, and they really are different things, I think. So I have to watch that, right? Especially building connections with my children. I have to make sure that I'm not being too tough, but I am being open, but also vulnerable. I think that's probably the biggest thing I learned.
And what took you into the world of people?
I think like most of us, it was an accident.
Oh no, I was deliberate.
Were you deliberate?
Yep.
I was not deliberate. So I guess I've always been the person in any workplace I've worked that people automatically flock to, because I just love humans, and I really am an empath. And at one of my roles at Hill and Knowlton in Australia, I took on more of a HR manager type role, like in recruitment and in our processes and things like that, just because nobody else was really doing it, and I just found it really interesting. And then it just grew and grew. And then once I'd got to ARM, I had two incredible bosses, both believed in me way more than I believed in me, and just kept throwing me challenges. And the challenges grew so much that I started just taking on more and more and more and more, I guess, core people-focused work until I was running a huge team. But yeah, it kind of grew like iteratively. You know, I had pieces bolted on, and I really, really loved it and just kept loving it. And my jobs kept getting bigger, and I just kept rolling with it. And here I am.
So there wasn't a desire to be a chief people officer or to be a chief coming from the background and having role models in your life. It was just a process of iteration and other people trusting in you.
Yeah. So I've always wanted to make sure that I'm the best I can be, and I have very high standards for myself. And I'm always thinking about like, what is the next thing? Because I'm very, very driven. But I never set out on my journey from where I started to think I want to be, you know, in a boardroom, around the table, any of that nonsense. I keep saying to people, the table's really boring. Be careful of aspiring to being around the table. The table is a time kill.
You've taken the words straight out of my mouth.
Yeah, like the table.
It's great fun, people.
Yeah, aspire to be that, yes. Yep. But, you know, but I've always aspired. My first aspiration was to make money because I wanted a different life for myself. But then my second aspiration was, you know, be successful. But I've never assigned a job title to that success.
Talking about that, what was success growing up? What was that driver? What was the motivation? What was your escape?
I mean, I think that something in me always felt out of place on our estate. I always felt like the different one. And I don't know if that's because, believe it or not, I was quiet. I was quite a quiet, probably more of an introvert. I say that and people go, what?
Yeah,
and
I'm literally looking at you going, really?
I definitely was a more thoughtful child. And as I grew up and into myself, I became more and more confident and certainly more extrovert. And I think COVID made me more introvert, actually. But and now I appreciate the balance completely. I'm like, oh, that's why people are introverted. That's why I'm knackered. All the energy, understood. So I always felt that I wanted a different life for myself. I felt very frustrated at times in my childhood that we had to wait for a Monday to get money in order to do things, or the place we were living in wasn't big enough, but we had to wait for the council to move us, and I couldn't make sense of that. I was like, why don't we just buy our own house? Or why don't we, it didn't make sense to me, and I don't know where that came from. It just, those pieces didn't line up for me. I was like, why would we wait for anyone to give us something? What? And I remember saying, I can't remember the words I used to my mum, but I said something very hurtful to her when I was about 7 or 8. And I said, I just want to get out of this. And she was clearly deeply hurt by that. And I understand now why she was hurt by that. But at the time I was like, you know, I didn't understand why you would just be happy with your lot.
Yeah.
so I just had it in my mind that you have to go. My dad's family was quite educated, but not really in my life. So I had it in my mind that you have to do well at school and go to university and get a good job and earn good money. And those were like some key blocks that I kept very focused in my mind of this is what I have to do. And it helped that at about 12, my mum then sent me and my brother that I'm really close to live with my dad in Harrow because the schools were better. And that for me was so traumatic because I was in the ovals, in the hubble bubble of London, of diversity and richness and whatever. And I got moved to this place called Harrow that felt posh. And this is not London. Stop saying it's Greater London. It ain't. Like the postcode was H. What?
H-A?
HA1. That was it. And I remember like seeing a squirrel and I was like, what on earth is this place? I remember seeing my first wild squirrel. You should have that in South London. But gosh, that changed my life. Like I hated it at the time, but now I look back and some of the people I met and what I saw and witnessed absolutely changed my life because I got the example of what else could be.
So before we go into moving to Harrow, what was it like growing up in South London? What was it like being at school? What was your education like, your friends, all of the things that made life for you as a child before you moved to Harrow?
Gosh, what was it like? I mean, I remember the Brixton riots. So I am that old people. I remember seeing, we were watching on television, but I knew that was up the road because that's where we would get the bus to go and get like our Jamaican food. Yeah. And I remember thinking they're going to come down Brixton Road and burn everything here down. You know, and I remember when the war was looming and Ronald Reagan, etc., was causing political threats, I guess. And I remember thinking, is a plane going to come over and bomb us all? Because I guess the world felt like such a bubble. And again, so much of my childhood now, I think back, is more reflective. But in it felt definitely tough. You know, there was, on the estate, there was drugs, there was violence, there was a prostitute living 2 floors down. I mean, there was all sorts of things happening on the estate. But actually, when that's your normal, like you don't think anything of it. Yeah. I now look back and think, bloody hell, I saw a lot. But also it was a community. And I'm really one of those annoying people now that, like everything, I find the positive in everything. And I now look back on an estate that would probably intimidate most people. And I think I learned the magic of community. And I had a childhood where I could play outside until it got dark. And if anyone came on the estate that wasn't from the estate, these very big, scary people appear and they would be gone. Yep. You know, we looked after one another.
You were protected as much as this estate was hard and difficult. Right.
We were all protected. And I was very protected. No one would mess with my family. Like, no way. Because my mum's one of 7 and 4 of those are boys and no one would mess with us. Still wouldn't. So I felt very protective, which is where my confidence came from. I was like, no one can do anything to me because there are a lot of people that will get you. Yeah. And I loved that. But still, you know, my mum and dad split and they had a very, very tumultuous relationship and a very passionate relationship. Like they would scream at each other. And I just remember describing the feeling once as I would often like feel like a scrunched up piece of paper. I could like physically feel myself, you know, go into myself when I'd hear screaming or shouting and think, oh God, they're going to fight again. And all of that in like one big mixing bowl. But school was, like, I really enjoyed school. I was a very studious student. I was just very interested in the world and things, and I was really popular. And some of it was because it was really cool to be Jamaican. And it was really cool to be part of my family. You know, my stepdad was in the sound system. You know, our house was a popular house. We had the Blair music. We had the first Sky Dish. You know, it was a very popular house, so it's really cool to be me. But then I also felt very awkward, and I also felt ugly, and I also felt... misplaced, because I think, you know, in the 80s, which is when I was a kid, beauty was thin and white and blonde. It's not like nowadays where different sizes are celebrated, different creeds are celebrated. Beauty was very one-dimensional when I was growing up. Yeah. And so my childhood was full of a lot of self-doubt, and I was a very confident personality, but I was not comfortable in my own skin at all. Because what I was seeing, what I was hearing, what I was feeling is what the world saw as beautiful was very, very different. And that was really tough.
And when you say the world saw, what was the environment? Who were your friends? Where did that supposed, this is what the world sees as beautiful, come from?
Yeah, because, I mean, there was no social media.
Yeah, so it wasn't that.
It was definitely... And weirdly, school was extremely diverse. Yeah. And I recall we celebrated Diwali, Hanukkah, Christmas. Like, I knew about all of that stuff and the songs and everything in primary school. Yeah. So there wasn't a lack of other growing up at all. I just think it was the dominant narrative of society at that time. You know, it was the television programs, it was the adverts, it was the marketing, it was whatever was cool and popular was not a sort of awkward, gangly, unconfident black girl with very thick hair. It just wasn't that. I didn't see myself anywhere or in anything that I thought the world saw as beautiful.
And so your mum, when you're around 12, decides that the schooling system around the Oval isn't good enough, and that it's time to go and live with your dad. Yeah. Before this, did you have a good relationship with your dad? Did you see your dad?
Like now, he came in and out. So I felt like I was moving with a stranger. Okay. And that was so terrifying and upsetting. I also remember I just started my period. So I was being shipped off with a man with very low EQ, who I didn't really think really gave a shit, because he was very wrapped up in his own life. And, you know, now I look back, I think, my gosh, like, you just took two of your kids on you hadn't really built a relationship with. I can see it from the other side now, a little bit, with a little bit more balance, little bit more. But that was so tough. I was very, very angry, very, very angry. And I didn't understand, because whatever school I went to, I was going to try my hardest. But that was really tough. That was a really tough time.
How did the anger manifest itself?
Gosh, you know, I just recently found some old journals. I was a very big journal writer. I'm so rubbish now, but I was very, very good in my teen years. And I didn't realise how dark my thoughts got. And I thought about killing myself a lot when I was 12 or 13. And not because of any one event. I just felt so lost and so unloved and so unseen. And I used to sit and think about, like, my funeral or what would happen when I was found. And I wrote about it. I was read and I thought, oh, I'm going to share my journals with my daughter. And I said to her, I don't think I want you to read all that. It was so dark. And there were so many times I just didn't want to be here anymore. and that was one outlet. But then the other was actually journaling, and I used to write a lot of like free prose or poetry. I used to write lots of poetry when I was younger. And I found all of that very therapeutic and very, I guess, healing. And then I made some great friends, 2 of which are still in my life today. And I guess when you meet other wounded souls, that's also quite healing. But yeah, so thank goodness I attempted once properly to commit suicide, but I didn't attempt that many times. It was more deep, dark thoughts versus taking action. But I did take action once, and yeah, it wasn't even like one event. It just felt like life was very, very heavy. And I guess nowadays maybe I had depression, I don't know what it was, but life felt very heavy, and I couldn't see any light or sun. And I thought the best thing was just to not be here anymore.
So talk to me about that journey when you got to Harrow, when you got to your dad's. What was it like? What was the environment in which you were in? What was school like? How did you adjust?
So, I mean, my dad is, he's smart and educated himself, and he had house rules. And not that we didn't have house rules in the Oval, but they were a lot more understood versus like rules. And I was just like, this guy is like, what planet are you on? And, we grew up, we didn't have a kitchen diner or table or any of that nonsense. We just kind of worked it out and, close your knife and fork when you finished eating. What? It's nonsense like that. And I say nonsense, I actually tell my child that now, so it's not nonsense. But at that stage, I was like, this is nonsense. Like, you're an idiot. Like, I didn't get it. Yep. But he was all about education. And whilst I get that, what he wasn't about was emotional nurturing and understanding who me and my brother were as humans and what we needed to grow into healthy adults. So that was really hard, that the only way I could engage in a good conversation with my father was to showcase something academically. And at times that was easy, and at other times I was like, I shouldn't have to do this. You should just be interested in me as a person, as a human. Conversely, like getting away from a very busy estate and a very busy house taught me the beginning of another part of my journey around quiet and still and calm. It was definitely those things. Mostly because my dad wasn't around a lot. He worked a lot. So me and my brother raised ourselves like so much of our years in Harrow. Yeah. And thank God I was studious and not naughty, because we could have done anything and no one would have known. But yeah, he was just absent.
This episode is brought to you by Play for Change. Play for Change brings together leadership coaching, expert facilitation, and builds communities. They help craft real connections, spark learning, and turn play into powerful experiments to enable better relationships with yourself and others around you. Let's redefine how we connect and learn through play. To find out more, go to playforchange.co.uk, links in the show notes below. When you think about that period of time, it was you and your brother that came to Harrow.
Yeah.
Before your younger siblings, there was also another brother?
Yes.
So there was 3 of you?
Yeah.
How did that happen that only 2 of you went to your dad versus one being left in the Oval?
He's older and he had a different dad.
Okay.
And was on a different journey and still is. So my dad took his children for a better education, rightly or wrongly. And, you know, funny enough, we've all found our way and everyone went to university and everyone's working professionals just in their own route. But so he stayed in the Oval on the estate and we went back and forth every weekend. The minute I could get back to real life, I got back on that train. Like at 12, I was like on a Metropolitan line on the Underground. I was like,
Yay.
But that's what we did back those days. It was nothing. And then I just felt like I had both worlds. I could go into the busy and have a great weekend and then go back to the quiet and the still, get my homework done, like on the train.
I love the homework was such an important part of who you were.
Yeah, I was like, I can't fail. I need to be successful.
Like, and success and the route out was the exams.
And my really good friend, I was friends with one of the smartest and I was friends with one of the naughtiest. And that's...
So you got balance.
I had balance even then. So when I wanted to, you know, stay on the bus and not go to school, which I did do, sorry, mum and dad, but I did, I could do that. But then I could catch up because my super smart friend, I would just say, oh my God, I don't understand that. And she'd explain and boom, and I could keep up.
And so what happens next in terms of you go to college, you go to university, you get into the corporate job, but what's happening in your personal life at this point?
Oh, really bad choices with relationships. Like, oh my God. I think, I don't know if I've got any better at that either, by the way, but so uni was, so many people have some of their lifelong friends from uni. I didn't make any friends at uni, not because I'm not a friendly person, because I am, but I was so focused on my chaos in my life that uni was like, I scraped through it. I just found it a huge inconvenience, frankly. First of all, I didn't leave home because I didn't want to leave my mum with the kids. And I took it on as my burden, which it wasn't, but that was my choice. I thought, I can't leave with the kids, they're too young. Secondly, nobody had been to university before in my family, so I didn't know about Oxbridge or Russell Group or any of that. No one tells you that if you're not from that. I had no idea. I chose university because I thought, I can get a bus there. That's how I chose it. I get a bus there, and that course sounds interesting. Was the sum
reason?
That was the sum total of my university choice, at that stage, the relationship with my mum was quite tricky. So as soon as I was finishing A-levels, which I did in Harrow, I actually stayed in Harrow by choice. I wanted to get back to Oval. But by that stage, everyone was spread out and there wasn't really space. Like I didn't have a room anymore, all of that stuff. And like I said, the relationship between me and my mum was really fractious at that stage. And I'd kind of be there and kind of be in a room, but kind of not, and not really belong. And that's really hard. So then I would sometimes stay at my sister's or I would stay with a friend. And I now realise that is classed as being homeless, but I didn't know that at the time. And I met a guy who was lovely to me and convinced me quite quickly to let's get a place together. And I was probably 20, 21 at this stage. But he was very controlling and abusive. And like, so many naive people, I took that he was protective. I thought that's because, that's what people do when they love you. They're very protective. So I would excuse away so many red flags. And I was studying and blah, blah, blah. I would excuse away so many red flags. And, he wouldn't couldn't hold a job down. Was very, very Jekyll and Hyde with me and very, very controlling around, you shouldn't wear that, we should wear that, or cover that up, or, so much so that, he became verbally abusive and I would excuse that away. And then it was a shove or like, you know, just holding on to you and shouting in your face. And then the deal breaker for me was, you know, we had an argument because he said the postman fancied me and was coming on to me. I was like, he was saying good morning. I promise you, he's not coming on to me. Like, anyway, he was convinced about the postman and got so angry, like banged my head against the wall and kind of grabbed me by the throat. And you know, like those moments in a movie when it all pauses.
Yeah.
And I had a pause moment then. I was like, this moment right here, Sasha, could go many ways. And I mean many ways. Like, the good thing about going to a council estate is I will take you out. Like, I will take you out. I'm not joking.
Yep.
But I don't really want to go to prison. So, although I think I would thrive and be fine and do a course and I'd make good friends, I'm at peace with that. I don't really want to go.
But let's not do this.
Let's not go. But I thought, so this could go either way. Like, I could fight back and probably harm him because I was angry. I could be choked to death because I don't know when he's going to stop choking and it hurts right now. And I can feel my chest tightening. I could, like, I had what felt like a very long conversation with myself, but I don't think it was that long because I could feel... anyway, I managed to maybe knee him or something and wriggle out. And I remember I grabbed my car keys because I had a car. I used my student loan to buy a car. And I ran out without any shoes or clothes or anything. And I think I went back once and I snuck back to get very, very, very precious things. But I just never stopped running. And all of that was going on whilst trying to study and do a degree and all the rest of that. But what that taught me was to start thinking about boundaries and listening to your gut. And if something doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. And yet no one's grabbed me by the throat since, put it that way.
So all of this is happening. You've now finished university. You've gone into professional world. You're a successful chief people officer and have been for a number of years. You've had your daughter. Mm-hmm. So give us a little bit of when that happened and what was going on for you at that time.
When I had my daughter?
Your first daughter.
Yeah, so, So finishing uni, I really focused on working hard. And in my 20s, my measure of success was my salary. I was just all about, I remember I had this thing like, I need to earn more than my age. I remember being 24 thinking, I need to earn.
I thought that was just a me thing, but I'm glad it was someone other than me.
I was obsessed about earning more than my age, then double my age. Like, I was obsessed. And so, you know, my first career was in PR and I just worked hard and kept climbing and had a lot of fun and, you know, found myself in PR and then HR. And, you know, I had some great relationships and at 31, I realised because I had spent so much time worrying about little brothers, etc., I hadn't done anything selfish, really. You know, lots of people took a year out, blah, blah, blah. I found my first job before I finished university. I went straight into my career, like on purpose, like by design. I was like, I have no time to take a year out. Good for you, who's got mum and dad that can fund that. I didn't have that, so I went straight to work. And at 30, I was like, right, I'm going to go and live in Sydney. And I had known a few people that had done that. But I took myself as far away as possible from the UK, and but because like security is a massive thing for me, because you know I am my security, I thought I can't move there without a job, which sounds insane, but so I managed like through my network to line up interviews, to do those interviews, and to get a job and be sponsored to then move to Australia. And then I felt much better because I was like, I'm not going to go and starve because, that's a big thing for me. And 3 weeks before getting on the plane, I met my now ex-husband, which is bloody typical. And I remember saying to him and to myself, like, I know this man is really special, but I still have to go. Like, I have to go. I can't not. And anyway, he waited for me. And actually, we built an incredible relationship because we had physical distance between us. So you just have to talk and connect, like, heaven forbid. And I stayed for a year, because then I thought, okay, I love him more than I do Sydney. But I had a great time in Australia. I loved that. And got back and got a job and, we got married. We got engaged, and I fell pregnant, which was always, I always thought I'd have 5 or 6 children. Didn't know how I'd have afforded that now. But I thought I'd have loads of kids because I grew up in a big family. And then we had my girl, Naima, and she, like, transformed me in ways I didn't know possible. Like, by the time I'd got to, like, 35, I thought I'd done my growing, which is very naive, Sasha. And then you become a parent of anything, like, could be a pet, could be a human, but I think you become a parent and accountable for something else living and breathing. And I just think it changes you again. And she's almost 13 and, unfortunately we divorced, me and her dad, but the niggle of wanting to be a mum of even more than one child never went away. So I adopted a little girl on my own a year ago. A year and 2 months ago she came home. Because I just thought I could have this niggle forever, or I could listen to my heart who wants to continue being a parent. And I set on this journey on my own, and it was terrifying, it was scary, and the world of adoption is quite white middle class. And I thought, I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. Like, she couldn't be more my child because she is fearless, sassy, and there's nature and nurture, and my goodness, that really is a thing. And I couldn't love her more if she came from me. In fact, I love her more because I didn't have to give birth to her. She did me a favour. Thank you for not putting me through that again. So now I have 2 kids. And, for anyone that ever thought about it, absolutely do it. Like, it's hard work, but what you're put through is good for you, I think. Like, the training you're put through, I found it therapeutic. Some people find it intrusive. Of course it's intrusive. These children are in care, and you're putting your hand up to look after them. It's going to be intrusive. Yeah. But now I'm juggling, like, 2 kids and a job and trying to have a life of my own. And juggling is the only word I can use. And I have an army of people that help me, that I beg, steal, borrow and pay, so that I can be a great mum, but also that I also keep me, because I kind of lost me the first time round. It's really easy. So I was able to get back to work and change career halfway through child number 1. And now I'm back to work in my first job post second child, and life is really good. And
so you've just fast-tracked a whole heap of time.
I did. I just went through like 15 years. Boom.
You really did. So just to be clear, for anyone who missed it, was that you had you didn't have a 13-year-old. She is now 13.
Yeah.
And then a few years ago, you decided that you were going to adopt a child on your own.
Yes.
Because you hadn't, and this is the bit I'm going to add because Sasha and I have talked, where you decided that there wasn't a man in your life and you were therefore going to adopt, and you were going to do that on your own.
That is true. And like, I got to 44 and I thought, I could go on some dates and say, hey, you're great, do you want to get me pregnant? But I just thought it'd be a bit awkward. And who wants that pressure? I don't. And I don't want that pressure. And being a parent is not very sexy, you know? So I thought, I don't want to rush into a relationship. I don't want lots of people in my children's lives. I actually want to be a mum. So I stayed focused on that. And I'm always, I really am a big fan of, okay, what is possible? I don't want to know what's not possible. I don't know what's impossible. Like, what is possible? And what is possible is parenting on your own. And it's not easy. And sometimes, like Mother's Day last week was absolutely shit. And you get lots of messages, hope you're really spoiled. Like, I'm a single mum, people. It's not, we don't get spoiled. Not really. It's just not what happens. So, you know, you have days and moments and you're like, oh, this is really hard, really hard. But I decided that I'm not going to let being in or out of a relationship define me. I'm not going to let what society deems as normal define me. I want to be a mum, so I'm going to go do it. And I remember when I told someone this, Jenny, she said to me, you're the most resourceful person I know. Of course you're going to adopt. Like if you want to do something, you just go and do it. And I laughed. I was like, actually, you're right. Yeah. So
now you're a mum of 2.
Yes.
And from what I hear and what I remember of a very short story, you've had some challenging times with just by going to the doctors with your new little one.
Yeah.
So share some of the challenges you've had just in terms of since the adoption.
Yeah. So what I wouldn't want to do is glamorise it, because, you know, when people say, who are trying not to dig but invariably do, is, you know, do you know the history? Yes, all people that adopt know way more than they need to and want to. Not need to, you do need to know, but way more than you want to. And most children that are in the system have had some kind of trauma. And the first trauma has been taken away from your birth mother. And whatever judgment we want to have about birth families, that is still her family. And I didn't go into this with rose-tinted glasses at all. I knew it'd be tough. The training teaches you that would be tough. But until this small human is in your house, you don't know. And when she came, she was banging her head on the floor. She wasn't really eating properly. She had extreme, temper, behavioural challenges. And I really struggled, and my eldest really struggled, because we had a real cool, calm house. And this little tornado turned up, and she was clearly really suffering. And I found that really hard. The first 3 months were really, really hard. And I did think about, have I done the wrong thing? Would she be better off somewhere else? Because I am still human, and I'm still impatient, and I still want children to do as they're told, because that's how Jamaican children are raised. And it was really, really tough, and I'm on my own. So if I'm feeling ill, it's tough, you know. Or I remember I had to go for a smear test, and I forgot, and I was like, I had to take a 2-year-old with me.
Nice.
I know. I gave her my phone. It was all fine. And the nurses were amazing. But it's just small things, practical things that, you know, life is really not, it's not spontaneous. I have to plan.
Not glitz and glamour.
It's really not. But it is rewarding and wholesome and incredible. But it's not easy.
You've also had some judgment, if I recall, from a story that you told me, because the child you have adopted is a little Indian girl. Yeah.
So, you know, she's mixed heritage, but she does look Indian, and I don't. And, you know, we were in the pharmacy, I think it was, and the pharmacy called out her name, and I stood up, and they repeated as to say, oh, hold on, you're that... And yes, I'm her mum. And the look, I was just... Now, I'm used to the look because a person of colour is used to the look. But I was really annoyed. And at first, I found myself starting to explain. And I was like, I'm not going to explain. And I just said, Mum's coming all shapes and sizes. And I just left it at that. And, you know, to be fair, this woman, because I go to the pharmacy quite a bit for her medication, is now so extra nice when I go in and probably mortified. But, you know, to be fair to her, she was probably like just not putting it all together. She probably thought I was her nanny or something, but she just wasn't putting it all together. See, I'm being fair to her.
You are. That's not the conversation we had off recording.
No, I was furious.
You were furious.
I was furious because I was like, how dare you judge just based on our names? Like, don't judge or assume. I was furious because she actually looked at me condescendingly, like, what are you doing with this child?
Yeah.
I was furious.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of racism that sits with Indian, Asian, South Asian people when it comes to black people.
Yeah.
I can't apologise for the entire race, but I can apologise a little bit.
Yeah, and I didn't know that because I've actually not really experienced that. And until you are walking around with an Indian child and people don't understand like the connection, it's so interesting and disappointing. It's like, come on.
Is there any advice you would give to our listeners based on everything that you've been through, everything you've learned from a career point of view, from a life point of view? It could be in any aspect of life that you'd like to share.
Do you know what? I was asked this last week, an International Women's Day panel, so I'm going to steal my answers because they seem to resonate with you. The first thing I said was, until you stop breathing, it's never too late to try anything. I feel like we live in such a culture and society of fear, and some of that fear is founded. I'm not saying be reckless, but so many of us get in the way of ourselves and we second guess, we overthink, and we think, oh my God, that person's a chief, blah, 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 therefore they must. No, none of us generally know what we're doing. And, you know, confidence speaks for a lot. But until it's over, it's not over. And, you know, you might fall down and graze your leg and be bleeding or whatever, but you can get back up and you can try until you really can't anymore. I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned is I've had some moments of thinking, how am I going to get away or up or through this one? And each time I have, and I come the other side like a stronger, better version of myself. And even the last big hurdle I overcame, which was 2019, which was a catalogue of health issues. And I thought, like, will I come out of this? And I did, and you will. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've taken from everything is, however low you feel or however lost or whatever, until it's over, it's not over.
We started this conversation with who is Sasha. On reflection, is there anything you would add to who is Sasha?
Oh, that's a good question. I would definitely say a survivor. I would definitely say a imperfect and a little bit broken, but I always annoyingly look on the bright side. Like, my favourite colour is yellow. If I had to be a colour, it would be yellow because it's hope and positivity and cheers everyone up and is sunshine and all of those great things. So I think that's who I would say Sasha was.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Anytime. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
If you enjoyed that conversation, then please share A Class of Their Own podcast with your friends and family and keep spreading the word to those that haven't discovered us yet. It makes a huge impact on our ability to have the people you want. Keep being you through connection, learning, and play. You are a class of your own.